What music is this? Is it Chopin? Yes, it is. Welcome to my next episode about all Chopin's music. This masterpiece, crazy music, which doesn't sound like Chopin, is our today's hero. The name is Tarantella, Opus 43. Tarantella is an Italian dance. We can say ancient dance, a very old dance that has a very long and quite interesting story. Can you imagine that this dance, long time ago, was considered to be a remedy, a medicine against the bite of the spider, the name Tarantula, that made people, when the spider had bitten somebody, that it made the hysteria and hallucinations, but the hysteria especially, so the person became crazy. And the remedy was, and it is true, to dance Tarantella as long as he can. I read that it could be a few hours, but even could last days. Days of such music? Well, did it help? We don't know. Maybe it was, I'm just thinking about it now. Maybe it was to make people sweat a lot, and maybe that helped. It's a kind of like a sauna, You go inside, it's hot, and you sweat, and then all the sickness that you have goes out. I don't know. Anyway, as crazy as it sounds, that's how it actually was. But Chopin, Polish, with the French father, are like very, sophisticated, elegant man. We know his mazurkas, polonaises, we know his waltzes. Tarantella and such music? Why? We can shout. That's the interesting question. I asked this question to myself, but I'm not the only one. All the historians and musicologists are asking this question. Among them is famous Professor Tomaszewski, probably the most famous Polish musicologist, but not only him. But what do we read in his text? First of all, Professor Tomaszewski quotes Chopin himself, who wrote to his friend as follows, and I quote, "I hope I will not write anything worse than this in the future." That's what Chopin wrote. Such was Chopin's rather unflattering assessment of the Tarantella. But whilst that opinion would appear to be expressive of coquetry or nonchalance, it might also contain a dose of deliberate self-criticism, as the Tarantella represents a work from a period of transition. This is a very interesting topic, but I'm not going to dig into this topic. Of course, we are in the period of transition, a kind of transition to the next step of Chopin's writing. But I don't think this is the true reason of why this music is so strange and unsuccessful. But anyway, what we read next, there is no way of ascertaining why Chopin decided to write this work. What inspired him to do so? One might consider some fleeting contact with popular Italian music during the spring of 1839 in Genoa. But we have no details of that episode in his expedition with Georges Sand and her kids to the southern of Europe. it might also have been a commission from a publisher, though there are no documents to that effect. Then there is the third possible explanation: the fascination with Rossini and with his vocal tarantella, which under the title La Danza became a hit of its day. And Professor Mieczysław Tomaszewski believes that this hypothesis would appear to be the closest to the truth. Really? Maybe yes. Rossini Tarantella. Of course it was very famous. Of course Chopin knew that piece very, very well. How does it sound? So on. Very happy, very fast, very wild music. Very similar to Chopin's Tarantella, of course. But Chopin knew this piece. He loved Rossini. He was listening to his music a lot on concerts. You know, there is one very, very interesting thing. In the letter to Fontana, when Chopin finished this tarantella, his own tarantella, he sent the manuscript to his friend and asked him to rewrite it in a much more beautiful way, so that later it can be published, right? Because Chopin's handwriting was almost ineligible. Only his friend could read this and rewrite it in a beautiful way. Chopin didn't have time for that, and thanks God he had friends to help him with this, especially Fontana was his name. And Chopin wrote to him. Of course, he wrote first that, oh, I hope I will never write such an ugly piece, and so on. But this, let's leave it. We talk about it later. But he also writes something like this. And this, for me, is very interesting. Take a look at the Rossini song, writes Chopin, where Tarantella appears. I don't know if it was written in 6/8 or 12/8. Both versions are in use, but I would prefer it to be like the Rossini. So Chopin asked the friend to check how Rossini wrote this tarantella. What does it mean? Chopin didn't know? And here comes my theory. You know, I'm almost sure that Chopin knew Rossini's tarantella by ear, but not reading the score. And I think that probably Chopin was as genius as Mozart, by means of I mean that he heard some music maybe 1, 2, or 3 times, and he scanned it with his brain, and he could play it on piano. He remembered. Well, this is really insane. I mean, there are people like this. I'm jealous. Of course, I also can play something from ear, but definitely not the whole piece. But Chopin didn't exactly know, because he only knew the music, right? So he didn't know. But he was right. I mean, it was exactly written on 6 because Tarantella in general is on 6. But now let's talk a little about Chopin's trip to Genoa in Italy. Beautiful city. I'm lucky to know this city. I've been there. I visited this place, so I know the spirit of this place, and I love this city. I'm sure Chopin was in love as well. Unfortunately, we have no proof, nothing at all. No letters, because everything was destroyed. Everything is lost, so we don't know. But it doesn't mean that Chopin was not there. He was there around 3 weeks, I think. And now let's think about it. Didn't he hear the music during these 3 weeks? Of course he heard the music. When we say Italy, we think the music. Of course, food, of course. Football, right? But not during Chopin's time. But music. I know many Italians, and all of them are singers. I mean, they sing, they love music. They just are music themselves. Italy is music. Everywhere we hear the music. Chopin was there 2 weeks. For sure he heard live music all the time. And among other music, also tarantellas. And probably he wanted to recall these times, I think, and then he took the Rossini's tarantella as an inspiration to write his own. And this, in some parts of Chopin's tarantella, we have almost like the same notes that we have in Rossini. But okay, that's enough of talking. Let's now analyze this beautiful music. Tarantella's characteristic rhythm is tam ta tam ta tam ta tam ta 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 tam ta tam ta tam. So very fast, and we have long, short, long, short, long, short, or we have 6 short, fast notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ta 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 ta. At the beginning we have the introduction. That's the introduction. Immediately we know that this is tarantella because we have long, short, long, short. And now I want to, I will play for you the first theme. The first melody, let's call it, or the first phrase, because the construction of this work is very peculiar. Is unlike Chopin, is very crazy, but is also deeply thought of, and today I will explain it for you. So let's listen. Okay, how many voices do we have here? We hear maybe one voice, but there are actually 2 voices, and it's a fantastically written. Because Chopin very carefully writes here these voices. And I present them for you. One voice is like this. Let me play it again, because I know it sounds very strange. Let me play it again. And the second voice. Of course, they alone doesn't make so much sense, but they exist here and also later. So that's why we have to consider this piece as a 2 voices piece. Does it mean that there are 2 people, there's a couple dancing? Maybe, who knows. But anyway, let's listen these voices together without the left hand now. Let's listen and separate them. typical Tarantella rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, long, short, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, long, short, ta 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 tam, pa pam, pa pam. Right? So listen. Okay, and this is the first episode. Then we have the second episode, which we also have two voices. It's a very virtuosic episode. Here the second voice is answering what happened before. Everything is repeated again. Mind you that Chopin here used the copy and paste technique, something that he hardly ever used before. He didn't like it because he liked to constantly change something. Here we have Chopin who copy 8 bars and put them again, pass them again, so that he have a longer piece and he doesn't have to work so much by composing something new. But of course he does it on purpose. He doesn't do it because he's lazy or uninspired. He does it on purpose because this piece in general, the dance, the tarantella, the goal of this music is to put us in a kind of trance, in a kind of hysterium, like we are crazy, we must be crazy, we must dance all the time until we have no power and until we fall down on the floor, tired and almost dead. That's the idea of this dance. So that's why we have, let's listen again. And then this is repeated again exactly without any changes. The second episode. Repeated. Again repeated. Again. And now we have the new theme, very short, and the most singing, if we can call it singing, episode that we have here. But again, two voices. Here is something fascinating because we hear one voice and then when this voice reaches the highest note, the second voice is singing exactly the same melody that the first voice was singing before. This is how Chopin wrote it. Let's listen. So maybe it's a good idea for the pianist to differentiate the tone, the color of these two voices, even though Chopin writes nothing, literally nothing about dynamic or anything here, nothing at all. Let's imagine this is the woman. And now the man. And here we have something funny. This is a new episode and it's a really funny way to write something like this. What I mean, we have the scale, chromatic scale, first going down, and then immediately the second hand, the right hand, goes up with this scale, and the left hand goes down, and right hand goes up. This is, I think it's like in the dance, when one person, for example, goes left, then another goes to right, then the one goes from left to right, then the other from right to left. And this is how it is, and it is accompanied by the typical tarantella rhythm, long, short, long, short. Listen. And here we arrived to part B. Let's listen a little to part B. So this was the first theme and the most important theme. It is repeated 2 times, and Chopin definitely wants us to remember this theme. That's why he writes it, because this theme will reappear again 2 times in this piece. So for now we had no repetitions. I mean, we didn't have any repeats. I mean that we had part A, then part B, then part C, then part D, but we didn't have the A again, right? Nothing. Always is something new. Here it will change. We approach the second part of the tarantella, and we have this theme. This is also circles all the time, dancing, dancing, dancing. But we have also here 2 people, a couple, because the right hand is written in 2 voices. So once again, okay? And there is repeated. We have something else. I call it a kind of virtuoso figurations because it sounds spectacular. I mean, the way how it's written is very effective. And again, here we have again go back to the theme that we've just heard before. So the first theme of part B. And now let's stop here a little bit and think about it. What happens in our subconscious? We are a little shocked because before there was constantly something new. What we expect generally, we expect coming back to the beginning of the piece. Like, you know, in every piece almost we have this. We have to go back to A. That's how it was written always. Everything almost. No, here no. Here for now we go back, but we go back to part B. Part A doesn't exist for Chopin. He forgot about it. Our subconscious is a little shocked, but we recognize this theme. Here comes part C and then part D, which of the middle part, I hope you follow me. We had part A, part B, then part A again, and then now C and D. I'm talking about the middle part, the big B. Well, that sounds a little confusing, but I try to make it as clear as possible. So here we approach my personal favorite part. This music sounds like a pure dance. For me, like a medieval music, medieval dance. This is almost like a quotation, but probably it's not. But who knows what Chopin heard in Genoa. But I must tell you that when I listened to some other recordings before I learned this piece, I didn't had this impression of this dance, because most of these recordings are very serious. When I started to learn this piece, I'm still in the process of learning it, but when I was learning, memorizing and analyzing, I found out that this is a pure dancing piece. This is the music written for fun, and this is not like a classical serious music. On the contrary, this is probably the only Chopin's work that is really for dance. From the beginning to the end, we have no rubato here, no changing of the tempo here. There is no melody. It's just music for fun. And especially this moment when we hear here the drums and just people jumping and dancing with happiness. Just listen and dance with me. No, this is incredibly fantastic. And then after that we have something that reminds me of something. I don't know if you know it, but we in Poland have this kind of play on weddings, especially wedding parties, where there are quite many guests, many people. There is music and people are dancing, and sometimes they are playing in something that we call a train, which means we build the train. I mean, there's one person, there is another person behind, holding the person in front here. There is another. So people form a line, a big, huge, long line, and they are dancing, jumping and going, here and then here and then here, and they are just doing like this. And here we have exactly the same thing, because we have the scales in the right hand going up and going down, so making the kind of waves. So Chopin is imitating the dance like this. Listen. And this train brought us where? Yes, to the beginning of the piece. So finally we reached part A. This is almost the same, but the second part, the second episode, this virtuoso, here Chopin writes a little bit more difficult. He adds a few notes here that makes them difficult. I show you. And here we have the first difficulty. We have to repeat this top note, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And again repeat it. And here the most difficult moment, in my opinion, because before, in this virtuosic moment, we had in one hand there was only one voice. Together there were two hands together, but they played one voice. Here Chopin adds a chord, three notes played together at the beginning of every triplets, which it sounds like this. And believe me, it's very uncomfortable to play, especially in tempo. And what happens next? Now we have the coda, so the end of the piece. But have you heard this melody before? Excuse me. Yes, we heard it. It is part B. So this is, of course, it's changed, but the coda is based on the melody from part B. So this melody that came back, that was like a kind of rondo, in the middle of this tarantella. So let's listen to Coda. You know, everything like in dance goes faster, 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 faster. The drummer goes faster, 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 is observing, watching the dancers and smiling and laughing because they can't dance that fast like he can play. This is exactly like it was danced, and Chopin saw it in his own eyes in Italy. So he is doing the same here. Faster, 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 faster. And now here this is totally crazy. We have 3/4, so we have loud as we can. And the end, 2 chords at the end. Very spectacular ending of a fantastic piece. Of course, now, being serious, Chopin wrote, I hope I will never compose such a bad piece. Why? Probably he was exaggerating, because if he really thought that it's bad, he would never have published this. Of course, he was a very perfectionist, so he was sure that this is a good music, but he also knew that this music didn't come from his heart. It's not the music that sincere Chopin, who he loved to compose such a music. This is a light music, maybe even a kind of music for dancing. Definitely a very virtuosic piece. It could be also an etude. Not easy to play, and I think very entertaining. But maybe a little not in the style of Chopin. But I think it's worth to play. Unfortunately, it's not played so often. We don't hear it on concerts so often, and too bad. I think I'm going to change it. Now I learned it, well, I learned it especially for this project. I have to admit, I never learned this piece before. But well, I practice it a little bit more, and then I have it in my repertoire, and maybe I can play it all over the world, showing a little different side of Chopin's soul. Why not? So I hope you enjoyed this crazy analysis, crazy video, and thank you for being with me, and see you again. Bye bye.